All right, so I'll share my screen. I'll kick off from here. Now, this is what we'll be building. Building this from scratch and do the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript together. Then, if you have questions as you build along, please don't hesitate to ask. You can go ahead and ask your questions. We'll answer them together. Okay, so this is the HTML. We need to go through this HTML, or is it pretty clear? Just HTML document that gives you the form, and remember how we do the input field, the password, and the rest of it. But what I wanted us to achieve today is such that if I enter my password, I wanted us to learn how the click event works and how we can also manipulate HTML using JavaScript. So that is what we'll be dealing today. So I will start by cleaning up this JavaScript file I have here, because this is what makes everything work. I'll start by cleaning up this guy. Just a sec. So we'll start building it from scratch. I may not need to go through the HTML because I believe we all know the HTML. Am I right? Or do we need to go through how we came about the input fields? Is it necessary?
So for me, I would say let's just continue with JavaScript.
Okay. I think since nobody is saying it, I believe that's the general answer. All right. So let's say you built this on HTML document. You styled it with CSS. I styled it here with CSS, just simple styling. And now we want to build the JavaScript part of it. Let me delete everything here. Now this is my static page. It's not working. Nothing happens here. If I enter username, so I enter a username, I enter a password. All this thing comes from HTML. What I want to achieve today is such that if I click on this I button, my password is revealed. If I click again, the password closes just like that. I can toggle this password, reveal the password, show the password, and hide the password. That is what I want to achieve today. Not actually the HTML and CSS. But if you have, paraventure, you have questions on the HTML and CSS, please feel free to ask. Just so that to carry everybody along. All right, so I'll continue. All right, the first thing I will do is, what I'm targeting is my password element. What I'm targeting is my password element. Now, what I need to do is I need to find a way to target this field and also to target this image here. This is just an image I downloaded from Icons 8. I think I downloaded it from here, just like that. So this is just an image that was built into my HTML. This is my HTML file. So the two things I need to grab is this input field that has password, because this is where I want to click on this I, and I want this password to hide and show. So these are the two things I need to grab, and these are the two things on this in my HTML file. These two, input field and the image. I'm clicking on this, and the action is taking place on this password. Is it clear to this point? Hello, is it clear to this point?
Yes. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, so let's continue. All right, so the first thing we'll do is we need to grab this element. And how do we grab an element in JavaScript from HTML? How do we grab an element? We talked about DOM manipulation, and we'll talk about different APIs that the DOM has. So how do we grab an element? I say const. I want to grab this password. I can call it any name, but let me call it my sign-in password. Sign-in password.
You have no data.
Pardon? I didn't get you. Okay, I say document dot. Now we discussed various ways which we can make reference to elements in the JavaScript, that the DOM provides various ways which we can make elements to which we can make reference to HTML elements. HTML element, and one of them is document.query selector, get element ID, get element by tag name, and the rest. So for this exercise, I'll just use query selector, document.query selector. And when I'm doing query selector, put it in brackets. Since the query, the type of query I'm selecting is ID. Now, if you go to this element I want to grab, I have ID here. Now I can have an ID and a class. This element, I have an ID here. This. Okay. Actually, this exercise, I got it from another website where they did it. So I just modified it. I'm trying to remove their CSS, and this is my own custom CSS. These are our own custom CSS and some other things that they did. All right. So I'm trying to grab this input and this I. So the input, I have an ID to this input. Since I have an ID, remember we talked of grabbing through using ID, using class name, we can do using tag name here and the rest of it. So if I go document.query selector, I'm using an ID. Since I'm making reference to an ID, I will have to put this pound sign in front and make reference to the ID. The name of the ID is called password. The name of the ID is password. If I go back here, you find out that the ID is called password. If I was making reference to a class, if it was a class before, it was a class, maybe I had a class that I called a PP. I will do the same thing, but this time around, instead of putting the pound sign to be dot PP, and I'll make reference to that particular HTML element that I want to grab. Is it clear? Okay. Okay, so having done that, I've grabbed this guy, this input field. Another one I want to grab is this one, because this is the one I need to click on for action to happen in this password input field. So I need to grab this one, and this also has an ID called toggle password. It has an ID called toggle password. So if I go here and do the same thing, I just change the name, call here, call it, you can call it any name, toggle password icon. You can call it any name. Make sure it makes sense. Sometimes you find out that some people, what they do is the name of either the class or the ID is the same name they give it here. It's okay, but just to make sure we don't confuse it in case you're going through it and you want to understand. I might still write password here and write password there. Doesn't change anything, but just for clarity, that's why I used it that way. So this time around, let's not select this using query selector. Let's do document.getElement by ID. Document.get element by ID. Get element by ID. And when you're getting element by ID, we don't need to put the pound sign. The ID name is called toggle password. Toggle password. All right, so we grab these two elements. Now, how do we know we grab them? How do we know through that we've grabbed the elements? One of the ways we can find out is to console log this element that we've grabbed to see if the throughlet exists. If it shows you null, it means that you haven't grabbed them, something is wrong. So let's go ahead and console log them so that we'll grab these elements from our HTML. The first one is sign in password, while the next one is toggle password icon. Toggle password icon. Toggle password icon image I downloaded, as I said before. There's an image and an icon I downloaded from a website called Icons 8. Get free icons from there. Okay, so let me refresh. Okay, right, so I'm grabbing my image, clear, but this one is saying null. So there is something wrong somewhere. Document.query selector. here. So we didn't change it here after we did our example with class. That's what it was showing us now. We'll put the password. So you see that if you have, if it gives an output, and the output shows you what you grabbed, you know that, okay, you're on the right track, so you can continue coding. Because you can't call null. If when I had this shot here, it was showing null. Now, because null is an empty thing, you can't hang an action onto an empty container. Just imagine it that way. For now, it has a container that you can hang an action to, but null is an empty container, so you can't hang an action onto an empty container. We'll see more. We'll see. I will show you in the example as we continue. All right. So we'll grab these two elements. We've grabbed the password input field, and we've grabbed this icon here. This icon. So let's go ahead and call an action on this icon, because we want to call an action on this icon and want something to happen inside this input field. The icon name is called toggle password icon. How do I call an action on the password? How do I call an action on an element? Using event listener. I can go here and say, remember, I saved it in this variable called toggle password icon, and I go ahead and call. I can go ahead and call add event listener to this. And the syntax for add event listener is the action that you want to call, the event type that you want to call, and a function that should run when the event type is called. This is, you can use an arrow function to represent it. A function that should run when that happens. I can as well cut out this function and write it outside and just put the name here. So this time around, I'm writing the function inside this. This is same thing as writing function. Same thing as writing it this way. Say function. And just like this, it's same thing as doing this. But I prefer to use arrow function, which is the modern syntax when it comes to writing callback functions. Okay. All right. So the action I want to take place whenever I click on that image will be written inside of this function. So for now, let me say console log click. When I click on it, I want it to just tell me that I clicked on it. Okay. Rather, let me do this. When I click on it, that is when I want this to show. All these checks we do is just to make sure we're on the right track. So when I click on this, I want this output, which is what is happening here. So we know that this our action is in line, it's working fine. All right. So what exactly do we want to happen? We want to do something such that after we input username and our password here, when we click on this image, the password should hide. The password should hide. So the first thing I will be doing is the password I want to hide. Remember, I saved it inside this variable called sign in password. Now, this is my sign in password. This is my sign in password. Okay. Let me see. Okay. Now, just follow me. I will explain what I'm doing. So now, say input type. Okay. Now, let me show you something. If I'm entering my name here, let's say I'm entering this name, it shows here because the input type for this input field is text. If I go back to my HTML, you see it's text. But once I change the input type to password, whatever I enter here changes. It's hidden. But if I go and change it back here, if there's a way I can change this thing, this type, there's a way I can change it to text, it means that whatever I enter here will be visible to everybody, just like the username. See, now it's visible to everybody. So my assignment is that when I click on this icon, I want this type to change between password and text. So if I can find a way to manipulate this input type for password to toggle between password and text, because text is visible, password is hidden, I have succeeded in achieving my results. I've achieved my results. So if I could find a way to use JavaScript to manipulate this input field such that this type here, which is an attribute, remember anything inside an HTML element is an attribute. All these are attributes in the HTML element. So if I can find a way to manipulate this type attributes to make it toggle between password and text, I would have succeeded in doing what I wanted to do. Is that clear, please? That is the idea behind this thing. It's still showing. It's supposed to hide now since I've changed it to password. Okay, yeah, it's hiding. So if I find a way to manipulate this guy using JavaScript, I've succeeded in achieving this result. Is it clear, please? I need your response. Uzi, are you okay with it? Suka, is it clear? David.
Not clear yet, I beg.
Okay, not clear. What part of it is not clear? Just go ahead and let me understand.
Okay. Like if you want to hide the password so that it will not show.
Okay. Okay, now you remember that by default, HTML has input we have input types in HTML. Remember our input types. We have text, we have password, we have dates, we have do you remember when we did HTML? We have different input types. Do you remember that? Let's start from there.
Yes.
Now, if you remember
Yes.
remember that we have an input type that is called password. Now, that input type was called password by default hides your password. That one is from HTML. Is that clear? You remember that part? So that is why this input field, this here, is this input field here. Remember, this label password is this password. So because this one, the input type is called password, or you're already telling the browser, HTML is already telling the browser that anything that comes inside that input field should be hidden. It should be hidden. But if I change it to text, let me change it to text. It's no longer hidden. This one, it's this is what HTML tells the browser. JavaScript hasn't done anything on this one. It's HTML communicating with the browser. Remember, we still have more input field. We have another one called dates. If I change this to date, it brings out a selector to select dates. See? There you can select, enter date and stuff. There's a selector here where you can select dates. This my image is covering it. You see? Can pick date here. This is pure HTML. Nothing here, nothing JavaScript here. So I think we have another one called color. There were so many of them we dealt with color and the rest of it. This one gives you the ability to select colors, to pick colors and stuff. Brings up a color pick and the rest. Okay. So but the one we're dealing with today is we have a password input field. Input type. This is a password input type. So in order for us to be able to achieve our result of what we want to do is so that if we click on it, it will change the input type to text, not password, because we know if it's text, it will be visible. So if we can find a way to change this input type to text, instead of making it password, see this one is text. The one username is text. That is why username is showing. If I write my username shows where here. But once I come here, it changes this thing. So if I can find a way to change this type to text, I've achieved I've achieved my result. So is it clear up to this stage? Lucy, are you clear now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So any other questions? Any other person? Okay, I guess we'll just continue. So what we want to achieve with our JavaScript code here is to find a way to change this guy, the input type here to text, which is what we want to do now. Okay, so just flow with me. Now I created a variable and I call this variable input type. Okay. Our DOM gives us the ability. Our DOM gives us the ability to set an attribute. I remember the only time we talked about it is when we were adding image to our elements. You know how our image has, we have a source attribute, we have an auth attribute for our image, and the rest of it. This is an auth attribute. This is an auth attribute for our image. You remember when we were adding image with JavaScript? How do we add image in JavaScript? Let me say I go, you create an element called source, you create an element called image, and you add image.source, you add an image. Now, if you want to add and if you want to manipulate the attributes of our HTML elements, there are two methods we do that. There are two things we do. We can either set the attributes or get the attributes. Now, JavaScript has already provided a way for us to get attributes. Before I do this, let me just explain it. Remember I told you that everything inside HTML is an attribute. This is an attribute, this is an attribute, this is an attribute, which we did before. Now, let's say I want to grab a random attribute. Let's say I want to grab an attribute from this guy, this password. I want to grab this attribute. I can still grab it using my HTML, my JavaScript. Okay, so I go here, I say const. Okay, sorry. Key type. Okay. So this is the password that the variable where we saved our password. So if I say sign in password dot get attributes, what attribute do I want to get? I call an attribute I want to get. I call it I want to get an attribute called type, a type attribute. This is my type attribute. What I'm simply doing is grabbing this type attribute. So let me do console log so we see what we grabbed. The input type. Okay. So if we click on that button, we'll see that we grabbed the input type of this password. We grabbed the input type of this password. When we click on this, let me go ahead and click on this. The input type is called password. This word password is this input type here. Remember that this password has this input has a type attribute. This is the type attribute. And the number, what is assigned to this type attribute is password. If I change this thing to helper, let me just, sorry, helper is not a type, to number, okay? If I change it to number and I go ahead and click this guy, I'll get number because I've changed it to number. So because I am telling JavaScript to help me get the attribute, and the attribute that it's getting is the attribute called type. There are different attributes there. Let's look for another attribute and grab. Let's see. We have a type attribute. We have a name attribute. All right. So let me go ahead and grab a name attribute. The type attribute is number. The name attribute is password. So if I go ahead and grab another one, let's call this one name attribute. Name attribute. So I grab the name attribute, and it means I have to change here to name because the attribute I'm trying to target now is called name. If I display it here after clicking, I'll get name attribute. If I click on it, if I click on this I say no, sorry, name attribute. Yeah. This is type attribute, name attribute. For some reason, it's not grabbing the name. Okay, let's let's get source attributes from this. We get source attributes. Okay, let's get attributes from this guy here. So that one. For some reason it's not grabbing this name attribute. Showing us empty. I don't know. Okay, yeah, got it now. I think because we didn't refresh before. So I'm grabbing two attributes now from the same password, from the same input field called password. I'm grabbing the type attribute and the name attribute. So this is how you grab attribute. You use the get attribute to get the attribute. Now, this attribute can also be reset. This attribute can also be reset. Let's say, for example, we have this our name attribute to the password. We have this our name attribute to the password. And for some reason, I want to, for some reason, I want to change it from password. I want to change this name attribute from password to, let's say, from password to data. Let me just call it data. Okay. So I go ahead and set it here. The same, remember I grabbed it here, so I can go ahead and set it here. When you're setting it, I don't need to assign it to a variable because I'm just setting it. So I can do sign in password, which is this my name field, dot set attribute instead of get attribute this time around. So I go ahead and set the attribute. Now the attribute name I want to set, I will define it. Then I will write what I want to change it to. Remember that this attribute from here, this name attribute is password. Remember it's password. The name attribute here from here is called, where is it again? It's called password. Now I want to change this word password to something like hidden. Something like hidden. So I need to specify the attribute I want to change and the name I want to change it to and the value I want to assign to it. So I want to assign to it a value called hidden. I want to assign a value called hidden to it. Okay. Now, if I go ahead and console log it here, let me see. Sorry, let me. So remember that on line 6, I am getting the attribute called type. I want to see the value assigned to the attribute called type. Line 9, I am setting the attribute called name. I'm setting it to hidden instead of password as we have in the HTML document. Then we'll go ahead, which means if we do console log here, which is we are trying to console log this name. Sorry. Okay, sorry. I have to reassign it here again. Let me go ahead and reassign it here again, saving it to a variable here now. This name attribute, I changed it here, save it to a variable, and I want to display it here. So it will issue in this, because of this line 8, this name attribute that was formerly password should change to hidden. So let's see if we're correct. Should change to hidden. But remember in the HTML document is password. So because of that thing that happened there, it should change to hidden. As you can see, it's hidden. See, from our console log, it's showing us hidden. But without this, it will still be a password. It will still display password, which is what we have here. So these are how we set attributes and we get attributes. So we can set an attribute in an HTML doc, with an HTML element, and we can get an attribute from an HTML element. Please, is it clear up to this stage? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Please, if there is something you're not getting, just call my attention and we'll go over it again. All right. Because if we don't get this, it might be difficult for us to grasp the next one we're looking at. So that's why I'm taking my time to explain this. But if we've
Okay,
gotten
yes,
this,
I have a question.
all right.
Okay, because I'm wondering, you changed the name, you
Okay.
remove hidden. And when you look at the console log, I'm seeing password there.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to understand what really happened between when you console log, the name, this hidden appeared here. When you removed it, I'm seeing password. So I'm a bit confused. I don't know if you can throw more light on it.
From the default here, it's password. This is the input field we are manipulating. Remember,
Okay.
this is the input field we are manipulating. So from the default is password.
Okay.
The type attribute is number, the name attribute is password. That is number and password, which what we have here. So what we are trying to do here in line 8 is we're trying to change the value of that name attribute from password to hidden.
Okay.
So if I change it to
So,
hidden, yeah, go ahead. If I change it to
hidden
hidden,
showed before.
if I change it to hidden, is now hidden because I have changed it using my JavaScript. Even if in the HTML it is password, but JavaScript has changed it, saying that if I click on this, please change that attribute to hidden. This one is what you're changing, and this one is the value you're changing it to.
Okay.
So this is simply how we use DOM grab your attributes from HTML elements. Okay. All right. So having understood that, we'll now look at why you now understand why I took my time to explain that, because we are trying to do something. We are trying to target the type attribute of this our. All right. So okay. So we've seen how to get and set attributes. Now, you might be wondering why we're going through this get attribute and set attributes. Remember, we said that in order to make this password visible and invisible, our ability to be able to grab the attributes of this input field and toggle it from password to text may help us achieve that. By default, through HTML, the password, what's it called? The input field here is password, and by default, once it's password, it should be hidden. But if it's text, it's no longer hidden, it will be visible, just like we have here for username, which is what we all know. Now, our ability to make sure, our ability to manipulate this, one thing with JavaScript is when you get a challenge, you just have to think of how to solve it. Now, JavaScript, you now start to think, okay, what can I change? What can I manipulate to get me my results? There are different ways in achieving this. Different ways, I can tell you. I know you might even come up with a better way of doing it. But the idea is that we are looking at HTML that is saying, this guy has already given us this place to be hidden. So if I can find a way to manipulate this input, this attribute, this type attribute of the input field to change it between password and text, then I have achieved my result. So that's why I see we are taking our time to look at how to set and how to get attribute. All right. So I will continue with that now. I haven't said that. So we now know that okay, the input type, say sign in password. Remember that with sign in password is we stored it in this variable. It's also trying to call these our input elements. These are input element called password here. That has password as type. All right. Okay. So all right. So this is the okay. Now, so what we want to do is such that if I click, I should be able to change this. All right. The first thing I will do when I click, I've already gotten the input type. The input type here is I collected the input type, sequence input type. Okay. All right. So I want to now do something. I want to now use a conditional statement. I want to use a conditional statement. I want to use my if else statement, and I will explain why I'm using if else. So I want to say if this guy equal to the value type. So if this guy is equal to the value password, remember I am grabbing the attribute type. So I'm saying that if this attribute type I grab is password, something should happen. But if it is not password, something else should happen. So let's see if it is password, then if this guy is password, okay, let me just comment out these ones. So I'm saying that if I click on it and you detect that it is password, you do something. So I can now see if it's password. Should you okay? Okay, let me change this guy to let's. This is why I'm changing it to let's because so that I can rename it. So I'm saying that if it's password, then change. Sorry. Sign in. Set attributes. Password, then I should set the attributes to, if it's password, I should set the attribute called type, set it to what? Set it to password. If it's password, if it's yes, I should say change password. Okay. Else, if it is not password, if it is. Just follow me, I will explain what I'm doing here. Steps. Okay, let's see what we get here. Just follow me, I will explain what I'm doing. I will explain why I use the if else statement. All right, so what we're trying to do here is I'm trying to simplify this thing so that we'll understand it. I don't want to use conditionals. You say if blah blah blah, the input type is this, then you set the attributes to the password. Okay. Check. Okay. Just follow me, I'll explore what I'm doing. So I'm seeing that get attribute type, where the type is equal to password. Okay, set it to password. If it's not password, set it to text. Right. So, okay, yeah. Sign in set attributes. So the attribute is type and change it to type. Making mistakes. So what I want to use conditionals to say if my get attribute type is password, it should be password. But if not, it should change to text. But I notice it's not changing. Sorry, let me see. Oh, sorry. Sorry. My error on line 7. Okay, let's look at line 7 again. Just flow with me. So we are saying that if the get attribute type is equal to password, is password. When we click on it, is password. The type is password. Sorry. This should be the type is password. Then our input type should be text. Rather, our input type should be text. Then we should assign text input type. Then if not, it should be password. Also, I was trying to do the if else statement. I wasn't getting it right. So what I was trying to say is that when we click on that number, our sign-in password, which is what we have here, the attribute called type for that sign-in password, we are saying that if it is equal to password, if it is password, then we want it to change to text because we click on it, we want it to change. So we want the the attribute type to change from password to text. So we know that by default it's already password. So what we're saying is that when it is gotten from HTML, we know it is password here, but if it's password, then we should save text as a variable to this input type. Then if it is not password, we save password as a variable to this input type. I will do it using the if else statement, which I was trying to do before. So if we haven't done that, we can now set the attribute of our password. We can now set the type attribute to either text or password. Let me see if it worked. Then I will explain again. I know it sounds a little bit confusing. See, let's see. Okay. Okay, it's working now. Stop it now. Okay. Now this is how it works. This line 7 I wrote here, line 6 and 7, I can write it using my if else statements. You can say, okay, let's reason it together. Now, we just do this and comment out this. And let me use let here. Let me use let inputs. I know most of us understand if else. This one is called conditional. It's a short way of writing if else statements. Let's say let input type equal to sign in password dot get attributes dot get attribute, and the attribute you are targeting this type is our type attribute. So target the type attribute, which is we already know. So on line 6, this our type attribute is password because that is what is gotten from the default HTML. We already know it's password on line 6. So what we're not saying is that whenever we click, JavaScript should do something for us. Use if else statement and check if the value saved inside this input field is equal to password. If it's equal to password, then we want it to be changed. Then we want if it's equal to password, then we want this input type. We want this input type. If it's equal to password, then we want this. Yes, we want this sign in password. We want the attribute of this sign in password to be changed to text. Sorry. Please let me go again. We saved this to this value. So at this point, our input type, our attribute, our type attribute for our input field at this point is password. This is our input field here. This input field. So this type attributes at this point is password. So that is what JavaScript is just grabbing in line 6. Now, when we move to line 12, we are telling JavaScript that the value you saved here, please compare it. Is it called password? If it's called password, then what we'll do, we'll reassign another value to that input type called text. We'll reassign another value to it called text. Else, if it is not called password, reassign a value to it called password. So that is what we are saying. If it is called password, please reassign this guy, reassign a value to it called text. But if it is called text, if it is called not called password, leave it the way it is. It will still be password just the way it is. JavaScript will do nothing about it. So which means the value of this guy after this conditional should change. The value of this guy after this conditional should change. At the first instance, it is password. So JavaScript will immediately change it to, we immediately change this signing input type to this. So if we come down here and try to save this signing input type, say, okay, let me do something. Let me say const new input type. New input type is equal to the same sign-in password dot get attribute type. Same sign-in password dot get attribute type. So see what happens here. If I try to grab it on line 19, it should have changed from password to text. So let me console log it before this conditional statement. Okay, so let's see what happened. On line 7, it's supposed to be password. On line 19, it should give us text. Let's see if we are correct. This password here. Okay, on line 7 is now text. Then fail to execute set attribute elements to target sequence. I make a mistake. Set attributes. Oh, sorry. Set attributes type. Supposed to be 2 arguments. That's the value of the value of what you're changing it to. Okay, so let's see. Okay. So it's changing between text and password, Okay. Right. So this is what we're trying to achieve using that thing. All right. So what I wrote here is what this our conditional if statement is doing for us now. What I wrote here is what it's doing for us. So let me comment this out. So this between line 13 and line 16 is the same thing with this line here, but it's just that it's shorter here using conditional statement. This is a conditional statement where you have this question mark. This question mark simply says, if this value is true, if this is true, execute the next value. But if it is false, execute what comes after these dots. If this value is true, execute this. If it's false, execute this. This is called conditionals in JavaScript, and you'll be using them a lot. So if I go ahead and use, it's a short form of writing if-else statements. See, we have the same result. So in case you're having issues understanding these conditionals, let me remove this. You can go ahead and use your if-else statement, but I advise you learn these conditionals. So let me remove all this thing. So we succeeded in. So these are 2 ways of doing this. This is using conditional statements, using conditional statements, and the second one is using our if-else conditionals. So what this if-else is doing is, let me go over it again. Remember that on line 6, our password input type is the attribute called type for our input field is called password. Now, when we move to line 8, we are now instructing JavaScript. Check the variable. We are telling you, okay, check the variable you saved here. Is it equal to this word password? If the answer is yes, you know this block of code will only run if this conditional is true. So if the answer is true, execute this. And what are we telling? Why are we telling you to execute? We are saying change the attribute called type. Change that attribute that is called type is in this sign-in password. Change it to text. Else, set it to password. Else means that, which means the next time you're coming back to do this circle after you've changed it, since it is now text, you have to go back to password. So in that way, you're toggling it between password and text, password and text, password and text. So this is how you do it using your if-else statements, and this is how you also do it using your conditionals. Please, is it clear? Hope I didn't confuse anybody. So this is how we do password toggle using, oh, sorry, I'm supposed to, so this is how we do password toggle using your JavaScript. Is it clear, please?
It's clear, sir.
All right.
Okay, it's clear.
Is it clear, Uzi?
Yes, sir.
All right. What about David, Felix?
Sir, it's clear.
Okay. Okay. All right. Amudi, are you following?
Yes, sir.
All right. So another thing that we may do is see this sign here, this my button. I haven't implemented changing it, which I think we'll do in this class now. And let's see how to toggle this from. I have two images. What I simply did is I just downloaded two set of images. So if I click to, I also want it to toggle just the way the password is toggling. So what I did I have two set of images. One is this image. Not showing. Second one is this. Just random images. These are the two images. One is this. I thought I pasted this. Sorry, wrong folder. Okay, so these are the two images. Just two separate images, nothing much. And so the assignment, what we need to do now is to toggle between the both of them. Okay, the background is, I think, dark. That's why it's not showing. You can see it's showing there, but it's dark. Background is black. Okay. And it's even showing here too. This is black. But these are the images. Let me go ahead and show you. One is this one, and the other one is I think the hidden images, the eye with this one. So I just downloaded the both images here, and I'm using the hidden. Okay. Let me just a sec. All right, sorry for that. Okay, so another thing we want to do is also to toggle this image, and we can use different approaches, as I said before, and we can also use JavaScript. So the first thing we'll be doing is, how do we toggle this image? That is what we will think about. How do we toggle this image? Now, if we want to toggle this image, if we can find a way to change this source, we've succeeded in toggling this image. For instance, if I come here and change this to I, because I think it's the name. Is it not the name? Okay, let me see. Let's change it to I think I like this. Okay, see, it has changed. So if I can find a way to change this source attribute to I instead of what it was before, which means I've succeeded in toggling it. So anything I can do to change that source attributes that HTML provides. So it's just to get two images and toggle between the two images when you click. All right, so let's go ahead and see how we can also implement that when we click on that button. Okay, so what we can do is just okay, just the same thing we did here before, but this time around, let me use the conditionals. Let me use conditionals. Let me use conditional instead of using if else statement. Okay, so let's say I save it in a variable. I said icon image source, icon image source. Okay, and I say icon image source. What I'm trying to do is to say toggle password icon dot get attributes The attribute I'm trying to target is the source attribute. Don't forget, get attribute called source. Get attribute called source. All I'll be saying is if this source attribute equal to just the same approach. But this time around, I just have to put in the link to the image, and I write the name of the image. If it's equal to I what do I call it? G. If it's equal to this, then if this is true, if it's equal to this, then it should be changed to this. Yes, then it should be changed to this. Change to I. This means else. This what is it called again? This column means X. Else. When you write an if else statement, that column means else. Okay. What I've simply done is this. I've said that I'm setting this. Okay, this get attributes. I'm getting this source attributes, and I'm saying that if it is equal to this, then change this to the next one. Else, leave it the way it was before. Okay, so I haven't done that. I can now go ahead and set this. And now go ahead and say, I can now go ahead and say toggle password icon dot set attributes. Change the attributes. The attribute I want to set is called source. Okay, and I change it to, I can change it to whatever is stored in this variable now. So I can change it to icon image source. Meanwhile, you know that this one will be changing alternatively. So it will correspond with the change. So let's go ahead and see if that's correct. Okay. Was the reverse? So, it's working, but it's responding too late. Doesn't respond. Okay. Doesn't respond when I click. Only responds. Uh, maybe along with this one. Okay. But basically, this is what you do. I will see why it's actually not responding when you click. It only responds when the page reloads again. When the window reloads again. I guess because we are calling it on the image itself. You know, this thing we are calling it on the same image that is we are calling it on the image. So we are saying that when we click on it, it should change. But it's not responding the first time we do it. It's rather responding after the first time. It's supposed to respond now, but it doesn't respond, and it starts responding afterwards. So I will check why it's not responding immediately. I'll check why. I will maybe in the next class I will let us know. Then it's even good. Let's also see if there's something you can find out about it, find out why it's not responding immediately. I'm sure it's something that has to do with how the browser loads. I will find out why that happens. But basically, this is it. This is what we intended discussing today, and I wanted us to look at it together. And there are questions you can go ahead and ask. Let me just comment this out. Basically, at least today we've learned something that we see that we can apply in our everyday usage when entering password, how you click toggle between hidden and how you click between hidden and open password. So this is what we'll be looking at today. We have less than 5 minutes. And if there are questions, please go ahead and ask. Any questions? Lucy, any questions from anybody? Hello, Uzi, do you have questions?
No, I don't have questions.
What about you, David? I've not heard your voice today. Hope you're good.
Yeah, I'm good, sir.
Sorry?
Okay, I'm good, sir. Thank you.
All right, all right. Okay. All right, so let's do something. I hope I hope because I wanted us to take another approach to our learning this time around. Let me stop record. I wanted us to take a different approach.